Hello, everybody who's watching. Uh, yeah, Dr. Gasolo is me. All right, Dr. Gasolo. Yeah, there is not much to say about Dr. Gasolo, but the person you are seeing right now is Dr. Gasolo, um, uh, an artist. I do a lot of things in the arts sector. I'm a poet, writer, director, and actor. Actually, I do a lot of things. Uh, it's been quite a while now. I started back when I was still at school. Actually, my first love in art is acting. So I started off as an actor, but a lot of my directors back then loved my voice. So they would give me roles that included poetry. There was a lot of poetry in the roles I used to play back then at school. That's when I discovered that no, I can do poetry. So I started writing my own poems. Um, I'm someone who is very deep in culture, in our African tradition. So even my poetry, I make sure that everything I do, I try by all means to take people back to our roots. So my poetry is mainly promoting the African tradition. Um, in our modern day Zimbabwe, a lot of people want to turn back to our African tradition. They want to know more about our culture. They want to know more about themselves, who they are. So my poetry is promoting that. Yeah, so far I have got one full album with 10 poems. The album is titled Sesenjeni, meaning that we are in trouble. Uh, Besides that album, I have got a number of single recordings. That album was recorded during the lockdown period when everyone was locked down, when movement was restricted. And there was a lot going on. So just, I was simply narrating the situation, what was going on that time. Sesenjeni, meaning we are in trouble because the whole world was in trouble. So that's what I was talking about. And I have a few poems there in that album where I talk about the social life of of people in our society. Actually, the title of that poem is Ikwanta Munyalzonda, but people prefer to call it Nomalanga. That's what right there I was talking about what's happening in our society. Uh, a lot of people are moving down south for greener pastures, so a number of people lose their loved ones due to that movement for greener pastures across in South Africa. So the poem is titled "Iquantum Zonda." It talks about the quantum of Omalaija that took a certain girl called Nomalanga to South Africa for greener pastures, and or that's how I lost Nomalanga. But because of the love that I have for her, I don't blame her, but I blame the car. I blame the quantum that took her to South Africa. Uh, we don't really have an industry. Uh, People don't understand poetry. I don't know, or is it that they don't understand or they don't love poetry, but we are very behind. We are very behind when it comes to poetry. Unlike in other countries, people understand poetry and they support poetry. But here in Zim, we are very behind. Uh, I don't know. Maybe I will do more albums, more poetry, but for me, I just do whatever that comes. Okay, poetry played a pivotal role in our African tradition. Poetry was used to preserve, protect, and promote language. Poetry was used also to safeguard our customs, our traditions. It was also used to preserve our roots as a people, as Africans. Uh, in our modern day society, a lot of people have diverted from that original kind of poetry. Uh, Praise poetry was used mainly to preserve our language and so on. But nowadays, people do poetry mostly for love. They do love poems and just to talk about what's happening in our society. They hardly do that kind of poetry that preserve the language, that preserve our culture.